We have all heard so many times how important it is to have the association of a liberated and pure devotee. But yes, unless we eventually come to this stage where we want to reach out to others and uplift them and actually shed our blood for the nourishment of other devotees, our life will be superficial. Why will it be superficial? Because we are only concerned about ourselves. I would like to hear from him the qualities, or at least some qualities, required to serve as a mentor and guide. What kind of qualities we have to develop so we can serve in that capacity.
Somewhat of a counselor, coach, mentor by accident. And I would like to explain how it happened. When you reach the age of like 45 or 50, you kind of realize how messed up you are. You didn't realize that before. And you become interested in just understanding your own consciousness, your own motives, your own psychology, your emotional makeup, and effort to improve yourself. And you start to see your beliefs, destructive beliefs out of alignment with what you want to achieve, and many aspects of your life you become more aware of. So that's what I did for a period of time, and I studied with obviously I knew it was going to help other people, but my original intention was to help myself. I read a lot, but maybe more importantly than reading, I did work on myself, and some of the work was very difficult, extremely difficult. Like you'd have to go in front of an audience, and everyone in the audience would tell you what they don't like about you. And you'd have to say, "Thank you for sharing, and I will try to implement what you said." Things of that nature, and you'd have to develop beliefs. Like at this moment, you're the happiest person in the world, and the next moment they'd say, now you have to believe you're the most miserable person, and they would teach you how to develop beliefs, and just difficult things. But I found it helped me a lot, and I was learning a lot that was in our philosophy that I didn't realize was in there. And I was applying it, and I was gradually improving myself. And what I found, and you probably know this, but as I taught what I was learning, people would start coming to me, and a lot of people thought I was a psychologist because of the nature of the classes I was giving, and I had studied a lot about psychology, both outside of Krishna consciousness and inside, and so they were coming for counseling on so many issues, and practically every issue that they needed to deal with was an issue that I had dealt with and I had gone through. And it made it, in some cases, it made it extremely easy to help them because I had traveled that road. I knew what they were going through, and I knew the conditioning, and I learned practices that I could give them. So I think Devaki wants me to address both those of you who want to be mentors and those who want to find mentors. Is that correct? Am I speaking to people who want to be mentors or people who want to find mentors? Or?
Well, for both we need to know what qualities
a
mentor has to have.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, for me personally, I found working on myself was probably the best training that I had for helping other people. And so if you Hare Krishna, one of the things that I've seen, a lot of times people have problems but we don't really understand them. We gave a talk yesterday at the educational conference, and one of the slides, which was a little controversial, I said, a lot of times people have psychological problems and we throw shlokas at them. And it doesn't work because the shloka wasn't meant for that situation. And so I think as mentors, we have to know what problems to throw shlokas at and what problems need other systems, or what's the word I'm looking for? Remedies, protocol, understanding. So I found it very useful to work on myself and work on myself in various aspects, because when people would come to me, I would have that experience, and I would also be able to see the difference between a material, psychological, emotional issue, or an issue where they're out of balance, or something they don't understand that's affecting their spiritual life, but it's not directly a spiritual problem. And I think a lot of times we may try to solve a problem that's not directly a spiritual problem with a shloka, and it doesn't work. So I think that's important. Those two things are important for mentors. And at least, the other thing that I learned, I did a lot of training, but I didn't do training to heal very, very serious problems or serious emotional wounds, but at least I was able to recognize them and then tell the devotees that I'm not able to help you. You have a trauma, or you have a very deep wound from a childhood incident or whatever it is, and that you need to go to someone else. So I think it's important for us as mentors, counselors, coaches to know what our limitations are, because I think it's an injustice to try to heal someone where you're not able to heal them. You don't have that knowledge. So my work on myself and my study of psychology helped me understand that. And so I knew enough about the issues I couldn't heal to see the symptoms. I knew, oh, this is, when someone would say something, I could see that they've been abused, physically, verbally, sexually. I could understand that. And or they had severe issues of low self-esteem, which were caused by some incidents in their past that didn't require just me talking to them for a half hour, an hour, once or twice, but were going to require therapy on a deeper level. So that's one thing that I've learned. Another thing that I learned, that I think we all understand this, but we don't talk about it, and I find it quite interesting. Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave, you could call power user secrets for japa. If you go through his books, in America we have, like a power user means you already know how to do it and you're going to the next level. So now you're a power user. So he gave this secret, and it's like we understand it, but perhaps we don't think about it. He said, one of the ways you can improve your japa is to sit next to someone who has a taste for the holy name. And by sitting next to them, there's a kind of transference or osmosis. Any of you have that experience? Like if you're in the temple and you know someone has a taste for the holy name, like tomorrow, see if you can sit close to them and see what happens. So at one point in my life, there was a devotee who was encouraging me on a professional level to be a coach. At that time, I was looking for a way I could be Brahminical and still maintain a family. And she said, you can do A, B, and C, I do it. But my nature is, I don't like to copy, I like to develop something new. So then I was thinking about this as a devotee, what would be specific kind of paradigm for our coaching, both for devotees and non-devotees. And I thought the paradigm of association, being with someone who's not only sharing what they're saying, but they're sharing who they are as a person. And I realized this from my experience because I would travel a lot. And sometimes I would stay in people's homes. And these people were devotees, but they had very little association. They'd never lived in temples. They're just becoming Krishna conscious. And I would go through my normal lifestyle, which I'd get up, bathe, chant my rounds, study, and then we'd take breakfast together, and I like to talk about Krishna. And I would just do what I normally do. And I didn't really think much was transpiring. And then 3, 4, 5 days later, I'd be leaving, and there'd be this big emotional experience. And they'd say, Prabhu, our lives have totally changed. And I was like totally in shock because all I did was just what I do every day. But I realized that because they were new devotees and I had been doing this for decades, it had a tremendous impact on them. And this was happening again and again. And I'm not saying this to boast, but I think any of you who are serious about Krishna consciousness, if you live with a family who doesn't have that much association, they've never lived in a temple, they're just becoming devotees, they would say the same thing. So I was realizing it's, of course, when we're mentoring, there are so many skills. We'll talk about listening skills, being empathetic, giving proper advice. But this is another, and then we also talk about, and Devaki talks about this in her book, you have to be an example. But I'm talking more, not just an example, but what I was seeing was this transference of what's going on in your heart and mind, they're picking up on it. It's the same thing that Bhaktivinoda Thakur said. You're sitting next to someone, they have a taste for chanting, all of a sudden you're getting something, you're feeling something. And we, those of us who are disciples of Prabhupada, we got this heavy doses of this. It was like, we know we were doing things and feeling things that we were unqualified to do and feel. All Prabhupada disciples will say that. We were having kirtans which were off the charts, amazing kirtans. It's just Prabhupada would smile and go like this, and then the ecstasy was raining down, undeserved, but being blessed by it. And so we had that experience of the transformative effect of just being with someone who's pure. So I think aside from just setting an example, which you could do, but internally not be pure, you could fake it, so to speak, just to want to set the example. This is a deeper level. And so I've seen in coaching, mentoring, that we have a tremendous effect on people, both positively and negatively. And they've done some science about this. The electrical magnetic energy from your heart goes out about 3 meters. And that's why you meet someone and say, I don't like his vibes. Or I like his vibes, because you feel it, isn't it? So, preme bhakti jahaiti, that's the idea, that you, when we're mentoring, who we are on the deepest level, the level of consciousness, is having effect. And so we say sometimes, yes, you should just listen. You should sometimes. That's the best you can give to someone. But who you are at the same time in consciousness, and it can have a tremendous effect. So that's another reason to work on yourself, and how working on yourself just by who you are and just by your existence can have tremendous effect on people. And we had this example with one of our godbrothers, Jayananda Prabhu, who I had the great fortune of associating with. And anyone who associated with Jayananda would say that the reason I became a devotee is just because who Jayananda was. Just being in his presence, it just transformed me because of his intense humility and his intense saintliness. And I know the devotees who were transformed by him, and many of them, we shall say politely, were very rough around the edges, to say it mildly. They were, as we say in America, unsavory characters. By being in his presence, they softened. He wasn't even consciously trying to do anything to soften them or humble them. It's just what happened in his presence. So this is, I think, extremely important. You're going to mentor someone, and you're going to be next to them, and there's going to be a transference. Another thing I wanted to talk about was in the recovery movement. The recovery movement is the 12-step program. They have 12-step programs. We mostly know them for alcohol, but they have them for gambling, unhealthy dependency, sexaholics, and so forth. And at one point, I had decided to develop a course on sexual purity, and a devotee who had been through the 12-step program of sexaholics said you should read their book. And he started teaching me some things they teach. And one thing that I love that they say, there are many things they say that are just incredible. And it was so funny. I read the book. After I read the book, I turned to someone and said, this book is more Krishna conscious than Krishna consciousness. It was like amazing book. It was like extracting the essence of Krishna consciousness in the context of overcoming yourself. And so this devotee told me, he said, in the recovery movement, they have a saying that you're only as sick as your secret, which means your secret, if you keep it inside, it doesn't get the sunlight it needs to heal. You have to bring it out and talk about it. And so the Sexaholics Anonymous groups, if you're part of that group, I think you have to go to 2, 3, 4 meetings a week. You always have to be talking about it. And everyone is confidential and everyone is open about talking about it. And whenever I get one of those letters, my dear Mahatma Prabhu, Hare Krishna, and it's from a man, I'm having a big problem. I know what the problem is. And I say, there's this program, Sexaholics, and I've never sent anyone to that program who hasn't been healed by it. And everyone who has gone to that program, every devotee has always said, this is amazing. You go there, you're not judged, you share, and it's having a tremendous effect on me. I wish we could do this in our movement. We need this in our movement. Every single devotee said that. So, one of the things, there's a few obstacles in doing this. One that Devaki Mataji mentioned in the book was confidentiality. And confidentiality is interesting. I was once with Jayadvaita Swami. To make a long story short, we were driving somewhere. I don't know how the topic came up, but he said, there is no confidentiality in ISKCON. I said, what do you mean? So he told his story that he told someone who said he wouldn't tell someone, and he told someone. So I hadn't really thought about it, so I started thinking about it. And then I realized confidentiality in ISKCON means you don't tell anybody but your best friend or your spouse. That's confidentiality. You agree? Okay, let me rephrase that. Has anyone ever come up to you and say, I know I shouldn't tell you this, but? Raise your hand if that's ever happened to you. Okay, did you hear the question in the back? Anyone ever, all right, not only did anyone ever tell that to you, did you tell that to anyone? Let's see, hands here. Okay, more are going up now, yeah. Okay, so let's do the math. You come home. I was just in a meeting, and we're in a group, it's called Sabha, and we have to be confidential, so I come home and my wife says, what'd you talk about? And I say, I can't tell you. She says, but I'm your wife. There's no secrets in our family, and we have this code in this culture, You have to tell me something. No. So we think, if I tell my wife, it's okay, because that's being confidential. But then her best friend is sitting next to her, Janavi, and Janavi says, I heard your husband went to a meeting. What happened? I'm not supposed to tell you. Oh, we're best friends. At least I have to. So it kind of works like that, right? So you do the math, 1 and 1 and 1, and everybody just tells 1. So I think we all understand that an obstacle to opening up is confidentiality. And we all just kind of have shown one another we don't have a high level of confidentiality. And let's go back to the original statement, you're only as sick as your secret. If we don't have an environment in which we can speak, then that problem's going to fester. I had, because of this sexual purity course, I was invited to a brahmacharya ashram in Delhi in one temple to speak. And we created an environment where they could speak, and everything came out. And one of the unfortunate things that came out was they weren't revealing all the details, but they said, I cannot reveal the details, because if I do, I would be kicked out of the ashram, and I don't want to leave the ashram. I once came to Mayapur when John Mastami was in charge of MIHG, and he was asking me to give courses, and I said, well, I have this sexual purity course. I think it's extremely important. He said, yes, I like this course. And then he discussed it with the administrators, and he said, I don't think you can teach it here because they're not used to opening up like this. It would be very embarrassing. So they'll keep the problem inside because we haven't created a culture in which they can talk about it. So the other obstacle, in addition to confidentiality, is that we are very good at judging people. Yes or no? Are devotees good at judging others? Yeah. Raise your hand if you think we're good at judging. Yeah. Raise your hand if you're good at judging. Okay. Yeah. Why are we good at judging? Because we have more things to judge. Isn't it? You know, before you're a devotee, your friends go out, you know, and you see them the next morning, and you go, what did you do last night? Oh, I got drunk, and we did this, and you go, cool. Now you become a devotee, and someone comes to Mangal Artik at 3:31, and you're on his case. He's a senior devotee. He's 1 minute late. What's wrong with him? He must, you know, who knows what he was doing, you know, at 4:29, you know. Isn't it? Do you ever think like that? It's a problem with our leaders. They come to Mangal Artik 1 minute late. Yeah. So we start to become, I'm exaggerating, but you understand, it's like that, right? To be a mentor is not easy. Actually, I studied a course in empathic listening. And they said even for professionals, sometimes it's difficult for professionals to hear everyone because there are issues that strike you in an emotional way and you can't listen to them. Like some of us are Americans and some of us don't like Donald Trump. And so if you're a counselor and if you really don't like him and you have a patient, so-called, what do you call patient, or a client, and they're talking about how much they love Donald Trump, for some people they would not be able to hear it. It's too difficult because of how they feel towards him. So sometimes many issues come up, and it's hard to hear. And this is a challenge if you're going to be a mentor, because you're going to hear things that are sometimes difficult, and their tendency to judge will shut them down. And so what do devotees want? They want to be heard in confidence by someone who won't judge them. Yes or yes? How many of you would like to be heard in confidence by someone? How many of you have stuff you need to talk about? Raise your hand. I've found if you're a counselor and devotees know it, there's a dangerous question. Like Devaki was saying, Haribol. Sometimes if you're a counselor, Haribol is safer for you. You ask the question, how are you doing? You're there for the next 2 hours. Because if they trust you, it's going to come out, because we're all dying, isn't it? We're all dying to talk. A couple of weeks ago, we did a workshop, and it was based on the concept of your relationship with yourself. It was looking at yourself, self-honesty. What do you lie to yourself about? How do you deceive yourself? What do you resist dealing with, and so forth? And we had to begin by creating this playing field where no one's going to be judged. Everything is confidential. And we created that environment, and it was amazing. What happened? Who was there? Raise your hand. Was it good? Because of that environment. That was, you might say, oh, it was because of me. But it was really because we created that environment where people could talk about issues that are important without being judged, in an environment where it would stay there. That's what we need to create in ISKCON, and that's what it means to be a mentor. And I think that's also what it means to be a facilitator, to facilitate that kind of discussion where we feel free to be able to open up. So the difficult part, both for the we're going to call him the client, the mentoree and the mentor, or the coach and the client, the difficult part for both of them is for the mentoree to open up and bring out stuff that's not politically correct for a devotee, and for the devotee to be able to hear it and not judge them or get emotionally upset. Now, if you're a mentor, sometimes someone's going to say something offensive. How many of you are mentors here? Have you ever heard anything offensive? Yeah. It's hard to hear, right? According to our philosophy, we should leave. Okay, that's it, I'm out of here. Here's the verse, Padma Purana, If I were Kshatriya, I'd cut your tongue, but fortunately I'm not, so you're off the hook. So I'm a Brahmin, and I'm going to convince you it's wrong, or I'm going to leave, because that's what Shastra says. But to be a mentor, you can't do that. You have to, if you want to be a good mentor, you have to listen to it. And then you're asking, but how they're making offenses, how can, they're talking about another devotee, they're very offensive, how could I not be upset about it? Because as mentors, we have to understand what's going on a deeper level. My wife has been trained in many disciplines of coaching, marriage coaching, interventions, and so forth. And one day she came back, we were talking about this, and she said, behind every criticism is an unmet need. And so when you understand that as a mentor, then when the person's criticizing, you understand they're not criticizing, they're crying. There's something inside that they're calling for. Other psychologists say it's a call for love or it's a call to be loved. And when you blame, you're just trying to relieve your pain. That's why you're blaming, because you can't take responsibility. It's too painful. So you find someone to blame. It makes you feel good. It's your aspirin. So as mentors, coaches, we need to understand this, because when we understand this, then we don't see an offensive person. We see somebody's in there crying for, they have a need, it's not being met. And when we see that, then we can start asking the right questions. And we can be non-judgmental, and we can help them. Another thing along this line, you all know the four regular principles, right? You're familiar with them? When Prabhupada initiated our godbrother Kusakrata, after he recited the four regular principles, then Prabhupada said, which one is your favorite? Of course, Kusakrata is like, he's a wise guy, so he said, all of them, Srila Prabhupada. That was the right answer, right? So, there's one regular principle that's kind of hard to perfectly follow. You probably know which one that is, right? And pretty much everyone but a few devotees, the few who descended from Brahmaloka or something to help this movement, pretty much everyone's struggling with that. You agree? So a counselor, a coach, a mentor has to be extremely sympathetic to devotee struggles. And I think the hard part is when someone has a struggle and you don't have it, and you're like, why are you struggling with that? I never had a problem with that. What's wrong with you? Isn't it? You can't be that way. You have to be, if you've never even had the problem, you have to be sympathetic. And what to speak of being sympathetic to the problems you've had and struggled with. So, I think we all understand now the movements, it's been around long enough that it's not so easy to be a good devotee. And many devotees leave because we're squeezing people into a very small circle. Isn't it? Like, okay, if you want to be a devotee, here's the circle. Do you fit in there? And most people don't. And if we hold that circle, we lose people. And if we hold that circle hard enough and long enough, then what do? We create guilt and shame in people who can't follow. If we open up the circle, okay, that's okay. You fit in a bigger circle. You don't have to be so pure so quick. So I think that's important for mentors, to find that comfort zone for that person where they can go up. Maybe the comfort zone, I don't know if comfort zone is the right word, but that place from which they can go up. It may be down from what they're trying to achieve, but they need to feel like, no, it's okay. So one of the big things that I've confronted in my teaching is a mantra, and it's quite funny. And I use this mantra a lot because I find this is a problem, that people are not okay with themselves. They're not okay. They want to be Thakur Haridas, and they're not. They're kind of like down here, normal European, American person. And they're not okay with it because everything in the book says you're supposed to be up here. And you wake up every morning, you realize, I'm not up here. I'm down here. And for a lot of us, being down here it's not so fun. It doesn't feel good. Because my guru is always telling me, you're supposed to be up here. And I'm like trying, but bing, I hit this, ding, ding, I tried, I got it, I was in Mayapur, 3 weeks I was up here, and I go back to the west. Okay, this is it. This time we're going to make it, and 3 weeks later, and sometimes Zoom, because you're overconfident from all the purification. So, here's my mantra. It's okay to be you. So I was giving a workshop, and I was saying, it's okay to be you. And during the break, the devotee says, come over here. He opens up his computer, he shows me a website. It says, on the website, it says, it's okay to be you. And so you're all thinking, so what's the big deal? It was a nursery school website for toddlers, 4 and 5. And that's what they teach them. It's okay to be you. Interesting, isn't it? So, as a mentor, we have to make people feel it's okay to be you. Just don't stay you. It's okay to be you as long as you're trying to be a better version of you, but don't kill yourself that you're not there. This is extremely important. Then there's so many devotees in our movement who are not okay with themselves because every day they go to class, and some classes are really heavy. Given by those guys. You seen those guys with the poles? You seen those guys around? Those guys can be heavy. Hare Krishna. Not this one. He's very sweet and he understands. But some of them can be very heavy, right? And I've seen that it makes many, many devotees feel guilty, and then they feel kind of like, what's the use, giving up? And there's a lot of people in our movement who have the all and nothing idea. Well, if I can't be pure, I might as well just stop chanting. Right? Because I'm not up here. So because I'm not up here, let's just go on the ground. Have you seen that? Yeah, it's a certain kind of psychology. So I think this is super important that people are meant to feel okay about who they are. At the same time, they're being accepted, because if they don't, they won't accept themselves. The last thing I want to say, how much am I, like I should wrap it up. Okay, the last thing I'm saying, and probably a lot of you know this, low self-esteem is epidemic in the world, and I think maybe we as devotees might be infected by it more because of this problem that our standards are so high. And one of the things I've noticed, if a devotee, if their self-esteem is low, a lot of times they don't value themselves enough to take care of themselves. So sometimes their sadhana will not be good, and they'll say, well, Krishna doesn't really care about me, My mother never cared about me, so why would Krishna care? And so they don't try as hard as they can. I told this story yesterday. It's a funny story. This girl came up to me. She said, during Janmashtami, I was so busy, I only chanted 2 rounds. Or it was like for 3 days in preparing, she only chanted 2 rounds. Can you help me with that? And I said to her, asked her a very strange question. I said, did your parents put you down a lot and neglect you? That's a strange question to ask when someone's asking you about japa, isn't it? And she said, yes. I said, that's why you stopped chanting. Because you don't value yourself. Is that true? And she said, yeah. And the lights went off. She said, because of the way I was treated, I don't value myself, therefore I just stopped chanting because I didn't care. So I think from what I've seen, it's related. When people feel I'm not okay, then if they have tendencies towards low self-esteem, then it starts affecting them, and it just throws them in the mode of ignorance, and they don't care. So it's very important, as mentors and counselors, we be aware of this, that there's a lot of devotees in our movement who don't feel okay about where they're at, and we need to make them feel okay, not rationalizing their faults, but making them feel this is normal. The last thing I want to say, this is kind of funny. A lot of times brahmacharis, when they're young, they can't figure out why anyone would ever get married. It just makes no sense to them after reading our books, right? And so, isn't it? one of our godbrothers was Virabahu Prabhu was asked this question in the class by one of these young brahmacharis who goes out every day on book distribution, who is like dripping ecstasy at every moment, and just trying to figure out why, if you could go out and preach every day, would you ever, like, even think about it for more than a lava mantra? Like, why? And Virabahu Prabhu said to the question, why would anyone get married? He said, because it's normal. So my message to the brahmacharis is, you are all abnormal based on this, right? Isn't it? Aren't they? Brahmacharis are abnormal. It's like, it's abnormal to not be married. So I think, you see how we, we have anarthas. That's normal. We have challenges. That's normal. We're thinking, I'm the only one. Let me tell one funny story, and then we'll take questions. Is that okay? Okay. So, there's a young man I knew from the time he was like 7 or 8. He had a horrible, horrible life. His father was an alcoholic. He told me that sometimes they would live in vans, sometimes they live in hotels, sometimes his father would be drinking. That was his life for years like that. And to use a colloquial, what's the word? Colloquial term? Slang? Okay, he was really messed up. And those are his own, in his own words, I'm really messed up. And I knew him, and he was really messed up. Totally irresponsible, unstable, anger issues, like uncontrollable anger issues. So we were doing a workshop together. It wasn't my workshop. We were doing a workshop together. And this was that workshop where you had to stand in front of everybody, and they would tell you how they feel. It was the most vulnerable workshop I'd ever been to. You've been to it also. I think both of you have been to it. Satvatov, by our friend Dira Govinda. It was very heavy. So we were going around, and everybody was like extremely vulnerable, describing their problems, right? And at one point, this young man, who at that point was not so young anymore, he's probably like 24, he started laughing and laughing and laughing, and nobody could understand. And so we stopped and said, why are you laughing? He goes, oh, you guys are more messed up than I am. And he found out the funniest thing, because... But I think it's true for all of us. We don't realize, we think I must be the most messed up person in ISKCON, for sure. How I grew up, but we're all in the same boat. And it's comforting to know how messed up the person is next to you. Isn't it? It's very comforting. You don't have to tell them how messed up you are, but just know we're all pretty messed up. And the glory is we're still here. And the last thing I want to say, it doesn't matter how bad you are. I think it's just glorious that we're all here trying. And that's how we should make people feel. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Mr. Sound System. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for so many wonderful insights. I would like to ask one question. Like, as a mentor, it's very important that we have no other interest except helping that person in their spiritual growth. Yes. No emotional interest, no financial interest, and even no managerial interest. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can just very briefly, we don't have too much time, but just 5 minutes, because I think this is also one reason why devotees find it difficult to sometimes open up, because they feel everybody has some managerial interest in them, and their own interest as struggling sadhaka is kind of a little eclipsed there.
Yeah. I read something recently which I really liked, and it said a true coach or a real coach may be the only person in the world that's completely interested in your welfare. At least at that moment when you're talking to them. That's the definition. Even your mother may want to get something from you, right? Send you to school, make money, you'll be able to support us. So isn't that an interesting concept? There, in the pure sense of the term, the coach is the only person, at least at that moment, that is only interested in your welfare. And I think this is really, beyond just being a coach, this is the definition of a pure devotee. And this is the power. I want to tell a story. This is, maybe it'll answer the question in a more philosophical way, but it's an amazing story, and I think it'll help us. So, one of Prabhupada's godbrothers said that Prabhupada was a Shaktivesh avatar. And then he said, if you know the word Shaktivesh, Shakti means power, right? The Shakti, and Avesh, empowered with the Shakti, the energy. Avesh is empowered, and then the energy. But then he asked it a question. It was a really interesting question. He said, he's Shaktivesh, he's empowered with the Shakti, but who's Shakti? And then he said, Nityananda Shakti. Because when you say Shaktivesh, well, what Shakti is it? And then he said something amazing. Two things amazing. He said, when Srila Prabhupada went to New York, what he did was exactly what he did and the results he got is exactly what would have happened if Nityananda Prabhu went there personally, because he had Nityananda's Shakti. Interesting, right? He said it wouldn't have happened it wouldn't have been any greater, wouldn't have been any different if Nityananda went there. It would have been the same. And then he said, why did that happen? He said, because he was completely clean. He had no motivation, no material motivation, so Nityananda could work through him. And I think that's the key not only for counseling, for anything. And I think we can also say, when Prabhupada was making us devotees and helping us advance, that's what he wanted. He wanted Brahmins, and that's the quality of a Brahmin. Miraculously, my Brahmin initiation was recorded on video. And then I had to talk about it. And in my comment, I made this point. Prabhupada was smiling. I thought, why is he smiling at me? Who am I? But I believe he was smiling because he was making Brahmins. And his hope was that if we could make Brahmins who actually care about other people more than they care about themselves, then we could actually do something to change the world. And I think that's the fundamental qualification of any preacher, any counselor, anyone, that you actually, you actually suffer when you see another person suffer. Like Prahlad Maharaj said, I'm happy, everything's good, but when I see other people suffer, it bothers me. So, you don't like seeing people suffering. That's what bothers you. And your intention is to relieve the suffering of the people you're preaching to, or the people you're coaching, mentoring, and so forth. And that's all. That's the only interest. That's it. So I think if we just get to that level, it solves those other financial and managerial and etc. And I noticed something. After Prabhupada left, there was a big shift, because now the sannyasis were becoming gurus, and their approach to their disciples had changed. As sannyasis, do you know, if you were a woman pre-1977, it would be quite rare for a sannyasi to tell you what time it was. They just didn't talk. True? Sannyasis were, most of them anyway. After they left, Prabhupada left, they became gurus, and they started they had to talk to their disciples, they had to help them. And I saw a change. They became fathers. I saw this father figure, and that a fatherly affection was coming out. And it made a big difference. So I think that's a good example. We have to care, and it can't be, personal issues getting in the way. So to me, in my experience, that's what I try to cultivate as a preacher. And I feel like if I care, Krishna will send me people, and I'll be able to help them. A lot of times, as a counselor, a lot of times you say something, and it's the perfect right thing, and it goes right to the cause of the problem. And after you say it, you sit back and you go, oh my Govinda, that was a good one. Isn't it? So why did you say that? Because you so much wanted to help them that Krishna revealed what the problem was and how subtle it was, and they're saying the same thing. They're going, oh my God, you're right. And you walk away, thank you, Krishna. That was a tough session, but we did it because you wanted to. And Krishna said, okay, I'm going to give it to you. Is that okay? Yes. We have time?
Very sure.
You want to come up and...
Thank you, Mahatma Prabhu. I thought it was very beautiful expression of your heart. I have a question. I'm a mentor. You know, there's a lot of devotees, they come for advice. And I also struggle myself. You mentioned about, you know, the bad vibes when you are surrounded in close vicinity, you know, with someone that you feel that
negative energy.
Negative energy. I mean, all of us, we feel that sometimes. And sometimes you know people who don't have any jealousy on you. Genuinely, they like you. But you can't force people, you know, to be nice to you all the time or to like you.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe to accept you the way you are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I came up with a special prayer. I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not. That's why I'm asking you. When I'm in that situation, and I also advise my counselee the same thing, rather than very often the older leaders say you should just tolerate and go through the purification. But I don't believe in that stupid. I mean, you know, for me it's like a donkish thing to do again and again and again.
To be abused by someone?
Exactly. Because, you know, we surrender many, many times and then to the confidence of someone, whatever it is, and then our surrender is misused. But not just once, many times. Like you said, you know, confidentiality, even to the situation with the guru. You surrender to a guru and then, you know, it goes away and then... But anyway, I have a special prayer that I go in front of the Lord when I'm in that situation and I pray, my dear Lord, please protect me from your devotees. Now, is the right thing for me to do or it's a blasphemy or should I go carry on tolerating like a mule? I have to get purified.
Well, you know, Prabhupada said, respect from a distance. We don't want all this respect for devotees, but we may have to respect from a distance because maybe the chemistry is not good. So, we're supposed to be happy when we see devotees, right? But sometimes we're happier when they're far away. So that would be my answer. Right? Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.